Yes, Greg, thank you so much for joining us on the You're Not Alone podcast today. I'm excited to have you on to have a helpful mental health conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, what's going on, Zach? Appreciate you having me, man. Always good to see
Yes.
you.
Yes. Great to see you too. And so I want to start with just asking you to give my audience a quick introduction on yourself.
Sure. So, hello, everybody. Again, such a pleasure to be here. So, my name is Greg Vogt. I live in Sacramento, California. Grew up in Southern California originally. And I am very passionate and involved in the mental health space. I'm a professional mental health speaker with Active Minds, which is a national nonprofit organization supporting mental health awareness and advocacy for young adults, particularly college and high school students. I'm also a speaker for an organization called Greek University, which supports fraternity and sorority life, particularly on college campuses. And then I recently, in the last year or so, was asked to join the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance for the state of California. So I'm a board member for that organization, and it's such a joy to kind of lead the programming there. So those are a few things that I do. I also a kind of full-time am in corporate America, doing some partnership work and things like that. And I guess kind of piggyback to the mental health stuff for a sec. The reason all that opportunity came about was because in college, when I went to the University of Arizona, I spent 26 months writing, editing, and publishing a book, basically a memoir titled "The Battle Against Yourself," and just kind of detailing some of my mental health journey. So super excited to be here. Obviously more to say, but I guess we'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, man, come on. Are you not going to plug the book after all of the work and effort that you put into that? And obviously I
guess I skipped over it.
That's all good, man. It's all good. And I know I had the pleasure of reading The Battle Against Yourself, which the subtitle is Take Control or Be Your Own Worst Enemy. And I was kind of getting reacquainted with the book again in preparation for this interview. And I wanted to start this off by asking you a question. So in your book, The Battle Against Yourself, you say that your journey really began in 2001 when you were in first grade in elementary school. And so I'm curious, like, obviously I know your story at a deeper level, but I'm curious for my listeners, could you share with them what you mean by your journey beginning then?
Sure. So there's kind of multiple ways to look at it, but what I meant by the journey beginning in 2001 is I'd say that was the first time I experienced any sort of challenge that my young brain can process as a difficulty. So gosh, I was probably 8 or 9, and the challenge at the time was I guess like some verbal trash talking or verbal bullying, and it was because so the kids used to call me a certain name because I wasn't that good at catching the basketball on the basketball court and things like that. And so it doesn't sound like a big deal, but as like an 8-year-old kid, it felt like the world was caving in. And so that's kind of what I mean by, obviously I didn't at 8 years old, you don't know what mental health is. You don't probably barely even know what your brain is, kind of, right? But it was the first time I realized I feel down about something, right? And it didn't really turn into anything serious for years, right? So it was just a minor thing. But that's what I mean by like, that was kind of the first entry point to noticing something, even at the age of 8.
Yeah, which makes sense to me too, because I do think that is 8, 9, 10, right? Like I have vivid memories. That's when little boys and little girls start making fun of each other,
Sure.
and they start teasing each other. And it's kind of the first time where you can become a little bit self-conscious of who you are as a little person. And
Sure.
talking about mental health, certainly in 2001, and certainly as an 8-year-old or somebody in first grade, I'm sure you weren't thinking about the journey that you were then going to go on with your mental health. So I'm curious, um, as you kind of progressed through elementary school, into middle school, into high school, what was that journey with your mental health like? Like, how did it what was the direction it took and how did it unfold?
So overall, elementary and middle school, it was neutral. Like it wasn't focused upon, but it wasn't not focused upon. It was just like, again, like back, especially back then, right? You really don't hear about it in the news and sort of less normalized and all that. I don't think I ever heard the words mental health in the same sentence, right? So it was just not part of day-to-day living. But the only challenges from that standpoint, that experience, were that verbal bullying kind of enhancing a little bit, becoming more frequent and a little bit more intentional by peers. And then in middle school, what I noticed, sort of a second thing, was, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was, I mean, partially because this was maybe a byproduct of that, but a second thing I noticed was, internally, I felt an immense pressure to meet the expectations of other people, particularly parents, teachers, and coaches of the sports teams I performed on or played on. And so, again, there was no big aha moment per se during, when I was 12 or 13 or 9 or 8 or 10. But those are two little factors that, once we get to high school, here in a second, were kind of looking back, sort of a rocky foundation to what would become.
Absolutely. So when you say expectations, like, what in your young mind, like, what were the expectations that you felt that you had to fulfill?
Just like that I wasn't a good enough son, or I wasn't popular enough. I wasn't maybe like good enough for girls. I wasn't the cool enough kid, like, to fit in. Maybe I wasn't good enough for my dream in basketball, like to accomplish certain priorities and goals I had for that path. Grades, I mean, I did well, but like was never a rock star. Just like kind of sort of everywhere. For whatever reason, my brain it probably stemmed from insecurity, right? Felt the need to really perform on all aspects of life. And it kind of bogged me down.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind to me is, like, it almost feels like you felt you had to prove your worthiness to the people in your life and around you. But I wouldn't downplay any of those things. I mean, anybody, obviously the audience mostly for me is that 18 to 35 range,
Sure.
but there's parents listening with kids that are experiencing those same thoughts, right? They feel pressure for their grades. They have dreams of playing in the NBA just like you did, or
Sure.
wanting to take it to the next level, even doing it collegiately, right? Playing the sport that they love collegiately. Or are they pretty enough? Do they have enough friends? Are they popular enough? Are they likable? And all of these factors contribute to a young person's mental health, their self-esteem, their ability to operate in the world and feel good, right? Feel at peace with themselves and the world that they're in. And you talk about a vulnerable age. I mean, that age group is so vulnerable. Your brain hasn't formed all the way. There's all sorts of hormones pumping through your body. And then you pair that with these factors, and there are so many different situations that can unfold. So for you, going into freshman year of high school, give us the breakdown of where you were at and kind of how things unfolded during your time in high school.
Sure. Yeah. Great points, Zach. So entering high school, I was pumped. I was excited. I was confident that things were going to work out well entering high school. And essentially it was the opposite of that, right? So my expectations turned out to be couldn't have been different, far more different than the reality of what took place. So long story short, sort of not midway through my career, but second back half the second year of high school, I was cut from the basketball team. So that dream that I had sort of hit a screeching halt, and I didn't really know how to process that. And I knew it was a permanent thing. I knew it was a permanent pill I had to swallow, but it wasn't an easy one to take in. There were some other pressures kind of going on, literally, like, it sounds silly, but things that 14, 15-year-old boys care about at the time, like, you're locked in on this person you like, this girl you like, and she doesn't like you back. And that could be, for a person who's kind of growing up, that could be soul crushing. Right. Or just like I was kind of saying, feeling the need to fit in or have the right friend groups and things like that. And some of that, not meeting the par I had. And so, long story short, there were these external factors that they were taking place. And in the moment, all I thought that was happening was what's happening to me. In reality, looking back in hindsight, there were some internal voids that were also present. And so when I speak to students today on college campus, I always say, what we avoid can oftentimes cause a void, right? So the things we brush under the rug oftentimes leave a gap, leave a hole, leave something we need to patch together. And what those voids were for me were, I wasn't willing to speak up and ask for help. I didn't know about mental health or how to prioritize it, how to seek counseling or any type of professional or non-professional service. And also just kind of basic, like, demeanor things or characteristic traits that I wasn't willing to take ownership of. Like, when basketball hit that halt, hit that stop, I wasn't willing to pivot and try something new, try a new hobby or sport or activity. I was making excuses for things and blaming other people, not taking things into my own hands. And so when you pair those things, those external conditions, which were true, right? Like, I did get cut from the team. This girl did not like those things are true. They're not made up. But also paired with those internal voices, you don't have a good recipe when you don't know how to deal with them. And what that recipe was for me, or what that byproduct was sort of what started as situational anxiety, retreating from friends, that type of stuff, which turned out later into a more fundamental condition. Eventually ended up into a depression, which lasted 4 years. Was diagnosed with major depressive disorder and anxiety, placed on 2 antidepressant medications and an anti-anxiety medication. And on one occasion during my sophomore year and one during my junior year, my brain became convinced that suicide was a viable solution for my life. Never could have pictured that. And so those things put together, here I was, kind of beginning of junior year, at a rock bottom that you never ever dream of or imagine yourself being, especially just as a happy-go-lucky kid, just playing basketball and hanging out with friends.
So, and you shared a lot there, and thank you, because I think that that's really important. So I want to unpack the timeline here. So you come into freshman year, hoop dreams, you got hoop dreams, you've got somebody that you have a crush on. You still have maybe some of this, I would say, tendencies towards anxiety situationally, right? But there's this void because you haven't been taught how to cope with your mental health in a healthy way. Maybe you haven't developed some of those life skills of plasticity where you can kind of bend and move with the changing waves and currents of life, if you will. Like, as an adult, oftentimes we get hit in the face with a change, and we have to make that change, right?
No kidding, right?
When you're a young person, that can be a lot more difficult. So in the timeline there, you get the news that you're cut from the basketball team. So hoop dreams are over, right? You said that was a permanent pill you had to swallow. Sounds like maybe there was a romantic interest that wasn't sending that romance back your direction. When did you get the diagnosis for major depressive disorder? And then when did the suicidal ideations begin?
So there were multiple I guess you can call them events that took place,
Yeah.
incidents that
Yeah.
took place throughout sophomore. Sophomore year was really the year
Okay.
of deep struggle.
Yeah.
Sophomore, end of freshman year, all of sophomore year, beginning of junior year. That
Okay.
was sort of peak thing that happened. And so, you know, as actually, you know, it's a good question you asked because as those things were happening,
Yeah.
my parents did send me to therapy and I did step into a therapist's office for the first time.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was kind of neutral. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. And so it sort of was a dead road, probably because of myself more than the therapist, just because
In what sense? Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was just in
Why?
I was just in a dull place. Like I wasn't, I was just unwilling. It was dull. I was a dud. I was just it was just dull. I can't explain it. I was just
When
not motivated to receive or hear anything. I almost wanted to stay in the rut because the rut was the easiest thing to operate in.
Okay, wait a
Um,
minute. So before we move on from that, there's going to be parents with ears perking up here. So, or just, a listener who feels like they're in their rut. When you say that you were so you were dull, which I'm interpreting that in my own way because I know what my dull feels like when I was experiencing depression, which was numb. I felt
yeah,
numb,
that's a good word.
unmotivated too, obviously. So I get that one, lack of motivation, not feeling like doing anything. But when you say it was easier to operate inside of the rut, what do you mean?
I think subconsciously, I knew my life was, falling apart is a little extreme, but not really. I knew my life was crumbling a bit and I didn't believe I had what it took, the skill set, the willpower, the endurance, the mental capacity to put the patches together and do the work and show up. And
Mm,
I felt the pressure to do it perfectly rather than progress.
ooh,
Um,
that's big.
and so, because progress gives grace, right? There's grace in progress. There's no grace in perfection. And so, in my mind, I just felt like I had to do it perfect. And if I wasn't perfect, well, then the easiest place to be in is the rut. And the rut is depression. The rut is victimhood at times. The rut is running away from problems. The rut is blaming other people. The rut is literally, true story, spending
Mm,
34 hours over Christmas Eve and Christmas one year in my bedroom and not opening the presents that my parents gave to me and them bringing up Christmas dinner to my bedroom because I didn't have the capacity to get out of bed.
yeah. And what was going through like during that time period when you were in your room for that 34, 35 hours, what was going through your parents' mind? What were they trying to like, were they talking to you? Were they trying to coerce you to get out of bed? Were they crying? Were they upset?
This
Yeah.
because this was in the middle of the challenges, so this wasn't. It was a lot to them because it was like 34 hours, but it also
Yeah.
wasn't like this is the first indication we've seen of Greg. So they were just, I think the words I can describe in this moment for my parents were heartbroken and helpless.
Yeah.
They just wished that they can get their son back on Christmas morning, you know, how
Yeah.
life normally was. And they wanted to give me the space and the boundaries, but they also encouraged me to get up. But when they knew that I wasn't willing to budge, they let me, they were willing to adhere to that boundary. So
Wow.
they
That's
weren't
amazing.
forcing. They were just
Yeah.
like, if it means Christmas isn't the same today, but Greg's at least in his room safe, so be it.
Awesome. And I want to come back to supporting somebody, right? And I think that you've got some knowledge in that area, but I am
Mhm.
curious, what was the pivotal moment in your mental health journey where you were like, okay, I need to like no more staying in the rut. Like the
Sure.
rut isn't going to work anymore, even though it's comfortable. And if I can't do it perfectly, then I'd rather stay here. What was that like pivotal moment where you were like, all right, I know that something has to change?
Well, I'll be honest with you, and this isn't going to be the same answer for everybody, but it didn't come from me. So what got me out of the rut was hitting rock bottom, like
Mm,
actually reaching a bottom that you couldn't, like, I guess the only lower you can get is death, literally, right? Not
yeah.
to be vulgar. So what that meant was on the second incident or attempt, which was in the beginning of junior year, I was sent to a psychiatric hospital.
So wait,
My
let's pause.
parents,
Let's pause
Mhm.
right there for listeners. An incident being what? Just so that they
uh,
know.
yeah, so it was my second suicide attempt,
Okay.
and this was during the beginning of junior year of high school.
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
Yep. So after that took place, I was escorted into a psychiatric hospital local
Yep.
to where I grew up. And I stayed there for 7 nights, and I knew that it was a short term thing. But my parents paid me a visit halfway through the stay, right? And I had been to these, over the last year before. I'd been to a couple of them. So this wasn't completely new for me. And
Right.
I know that there's some visiting hours, and my parents paid me a visit. They bring me a meal. And I thought this was just kind of a normal thing. So to answer your question, my parents sat down and like, hey, Greg, how are you doing? And so they're like, we have something to tell you. And I didn't, 17-year-old Greg wasn't ready to hear what was going to be said at the time. And they basically said, we've been over the last, several months, and especially the last several weeks, we've been evaluating our options. We've been talking to different professionals, mental health professionals included. Um, Also some directors at the school district level, because that plays a role when a student is at a school campus. They have to be involved. And my parents told me that they felt this was the best decision to send me out of state to a residential treatment center, for what would ultimately be the next year of my life, perhaps precisely 11 and a half months. And the next morning, I was picked up by a security escort, hugged my parents and little brother goodbye, and we were off on a plane out of LAX to treatment. So it was the conditions of doing something, right? In this case, acting on suicidal ideation, therefore being placed in a treatment center, or sorry, psychiatric hospital, therefore my parents really waking up to the heaviness of the situation, therefore making a long-term decision for me. And then there is when things really started to become realized.
Mm. I'm so glad that and of course I know your story, so I'm glad that you got there, because I think that that is so important for listeners. And I really want to unpack your experience with the inpatient treatment,
Yep.
because we've talked about that. And I know that that was a big experience and an important experience for you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're on the plane, you're heading out. I'm sure you've got all sorts of thoughts, right?
Sure.
When you land and you get there to the inpatient treatment facility, what, just give me the five senses. Like, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you feeling? What are you smelling? What are you tasting? What is the experience like as you go into this facility?
Five senses. I like the way you phrase that. Well, first of all, it was 700 miles from home.
Yep.
So it's pretty self-explanatory. 700
Yeah.
miles from home. And I was 16 and 3/4 at the time,
Yep.
month from my 17th birthday. And so I walk on campus with a security guard, and I just felt like a deer in the headlights. I felt confused. I felt dazed. I felt small, because you have this big campus, this big thing with all these people, and I just didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was going to meet. Like, even think this sounds weird at the time, but like how messed up these people were going to be that I was going to connect with, because like
Yeah.
I was messed up and I
Yeah.
didn't know like what complexity of that. And I just felt inferior and scared and fearful.
Mm.
and slightly regretful of my decision making, but I also felt like there was no other outlet. And so one thing I remember as far as the initial minutes on walking foot on campus, to answer your question, is the physical beauty of the campus, trees, mountains in the distance. The homes were very well put together. Everything was well kept, no trash, no ugliness at all. It was aesthetically appealing. And I kind of hung on to that for my first couple hours. Like, at least I got that going.
Right. Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. Where was it? Where was it located?
Yeah. So it was in Provo, Utah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So actually in the same city that BYU is located.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah. Gorgeous state for sure.
It is. So it really is.
Yeah. So, okay. So you're there, you're taking in the beauty. You're like, okay, at least I have that. Who are these people that I'm around? And, you know, for my listeners, I'm sure that there are some that are like, okay, this is maybe an option that I'm exploring. So walk us through that process. Like, what did it look like when I feel like inpatient treatment gets so stigmatized, and yet for cancer, right, people have to stay in hospitals and get treatment. Yep. It's a medical treatment. It's something that has to happen. Sometimes we go in and get surgeries and we have to stay in for an allotment of time, or we experience some sort of physical injury. And there's a rehab process to it that oftentimes involves that we stay at a hospital or inpatient treatment. So walk me through that process. Like, once you were there, what was it like? What did you do? And how did you find it helpful? Did you think that it was beneficial?
Yeah. So let me answer kind of on a day-to-day basis and on a macro 11 and a half months experience basis. So as far as the day-to-day, well, first of all, there were some changes that have to be noted. So one, you weren't allowed to have a technological device of any kind. No phone, no laptop, no nothing, no personal TV, no nothing, no car. You weren't allowed to leave campus on your own. You were 24 staff monitored. You had to eat the meals that were given, no choice in that. It was a 180-degree flip of what life in society is like. And so some of that is just an initial shock factor. But as far as sort of the day-to-day, right? The first few weeks and kind of that first month or two, I was just really trying to take it one step at a time. I felt really intimidated. I was just fearful and doubtful over my capability on navigating this experience well. But I noticed two things that really stuck out to me, right? So in the very first seconds, I noticed the physical beauty, right? Eventually that goes away. That's not going to help your life, right? That's just something that's pleasing to the eyes.
Yep.
But two things that I noticed that were really profound were, one, that people actually cared about me here. The teachers, because we went to school full-time here as well. The coaches of the sports teams, the staff members, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the ministers, everyone who was in position at this facility, I felt like not only did they know my name, but they created experiences with me. They wanted to sit down and get to know me and pour into my life and provide not just advice, but a listening ear and somebody to lean on, somebody to ask questions to, not just that day, but for the next 11 and a half months. And I took that very seriously because I knew it was available. That's the key word, availability. So that was really an eye opener. And I was like, okay, this is good, right? It's scary, but this is good. And we had a therapist that we were assigned to and just different things. The next thing, and this is equally important or more important, is that for the first time I realized tangibly that I was not alone in my thought process.
Yes.
And that goes back to your book right there as I'm looking at it, in my experiences, in my feelings. And what I mean by that is I was not alone with real evidence, right? Somebody can say you're not alone, And that's one thing to hear that, but with real like life experience to prove it's profound. And what I mean by that is there are about 250 or 300 people here between the ages of 13 and 17, just like myself, who were all there because they were having a difficult time in life. And for me, it was depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. Those were prevalent across campus as well. But we're talking things like sexual assault, eating disorders, PTSD, schizophrenia, gang affiliations, a whole wide realm of challenges. And I was living with 14 other boys in one unit, one house, and I was doing life with probably, half or most of the other 250. And we got to know each other very well. It was like a brotherhood. I mean, it was like a family 24/7. You couldn't leave campus, right? So of course you're gonna know these people well. And so not only did we become friends, but mental health became part of the day-to-day regimen and game plan and conversation here, because that was the culture that was created, but from a top-down aspect, but also the kids or the patients, the students. We we would have fun times and like be on the football field and talking about life or whatever, but we would also, people were willing to put their shield down, their mask down, and understand that we were all there for a reason.
Right.
And it was kind of like, we're just those kids. Like, we're not like the other kids. Like we have some challenges we need to handle here. So those were two things that were really key for me initially. And then from there, I was able to create sort of a structure, right? You go to therapy, you go to school, you have group therapy. You were able to try different hobbies on campus and different activities. I got to learn, and through the accountability they had, through the encouragement to live vulnerably. Overall, obviously this experience had lots of peaks and valleys, right? And definitely more valleys than peaks, but it was a big transformational experience for me because I understood what it meant to prioritize your mental health, to talk about it, to do the work in counseling, and just to take it one step at a time. And I progressed, right? It was not perfection. It was not 180-degree flip of life, but I progressed and life got back to a functional degree.
Wow. I know I'm a podcast host, but I'm at a loss for words right now. That was really, really powerful. And I think that there is a lot that you touched on that we could unpack. Mm-hmm. I love that you went into a community really that you felt heard, you felt seen, you felt like people cared about you. I love that you said, like, it's one thing for people to say that they're not alone, but you actually got to see it in human body form, tangible. Like, there's all these people here that are struggling with their mental health, and we're here, we're in this together. And then I love what I would call brain health centric culture from the top down that this inpatient facility had, where whether it was the receptionist or a psychologist or a coach or the pastor, like you said, whoever it was, everybody was thinking about and interacting through the lens of your mental health, thinking about how is this going to impact your mental health? And yes, of course, you can be involved in clubs and hobbies and all that's great for your mental health, but then being able to take down the mask. And I talk a lot about that in my speeches and my programs. When we go out into the real world, we all wear masks. We all do. And it's because to a certain degree, life is still survival, right? And we don't want to show vulnerabilities. And we're still, as a culture, getting to a place where mental health is at the forefront of everything that we think about. And how we interact and communicate and take care of each other. And what I was thinking when you were talking about this is like, forget inpatient treatment. This shouldn't even need to be like a niche business. Like, this should just be how culture is. Like, you show up at a school, you know what I mean? You show up at a school and, like, from the principal, the superintendent down, everybody every single day is putting on their mental health advocate caps and we're open and willing to have these conversations. And
Good
so
point.
you talked about the structure of your day. So it was therapy, it was group therapy, you were doing hobbies. What was the therapy like? What did that look like?
Different types of therapy. So
Okay.
one day per week, we were to meet with our therapist, and that was there's a lot to unpack. Obviously, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay. CBT.
But yeah, exactly. But there's, I mean, how do I even start? There's my therapist, right? I had him for 11 and a half months, and I know I would have him for 11 and a half months. And I knew I would have him for only those 11 and a half months. So it was extremely intentional, right? We knew it wasn't going to be a month, but we knew it wasn't going to be, we didn't have 5 years either, right? So this man basically unpacked my life and helped me see through his lens what my life was. And so I'm just going to give like one example, like, because we could be here for an hour just talking about the one therapist, but I'm just going to give one example that I hope the audience and yourself can take as a blueprint to what he applied to the rest of therapy. So in the middle of the stay, you know, we were talking about the girl who really crushed
your soul at the time.
My soul, I guess, right?
Of course, we've all been there.
And also the emergence of social media. You know, at this time, social media wasn't that big of a thing. Facebook was just taking off. But the therapist was understanding that Facebook was having sort of a negative effect on my life because it's not always negative for everybody. That's the thing, right? It's not only good, it's not only bad, but it was negative. It was negative for me because the people I was speaking about to him who created real holes in my life, who hurt me, not just her, but like other people for other reasons.
Right.
He knew I was thinking about them. He knew I was hoping to continue relationships with them. He knew I was connected on Facebook. He knew like my desire for that, you know, as a 17-year-old. And this is a very bold move, and I didn't agree with him at first, but it wasn't in a day, but he like was able to paint the picture and create the why behind the what. And the why, or the what, was removing everyone who you identified as who you need to remove from your Facebook and never adding them again. Now, that is not a recommendation for everybody to do, right? Like, even if you don't talk to people who follow you on social media, but because of the severity of my life at the time, right? Multiple suicide attempts, an 11 and a half month treatment program, he felt this was sort of a break through the gate type of thing. So that's one little analogy to the greater experience, but the bottom line is we had a working relationship. We had a relationship where he was able to unpack parts of my life and help me see it for the truth, not just for what my mind depicted it to be. And he was listening, he was asking questions, and he got me to listen, and he got me to ask questions, right? That's interesting. I'm the one going to therapy, but he got me to ask questions, big, deep life questions. And it did over, you know, not in a week or 2 weeks, but over those 12 months, massive, massive strides. And we also got the opportunity to do group therapy and other things like this sounds funny, but horse therapy. They had a horse stable with like 40 horses, and we got to learn how to like care for the horses on our own and take care of them. We had recreational therapy where we would like do different activities as a team to build cohesiveness and trust. Besides just playing like a game of football or basketball, but like really difficult, unique mind recreational activities. So there was sort of a wide realm of things. But the program overall, it was really structured, right? You wake up at the same time every day. You all go to the laundry room together and drop off your laundry. Then you go to breakfast together. Then you go to school together. Then you go to lunch together. It's very, very much like that. And I think that's kind of what I needed in a way.
I mean, the whole experience just sounds amazing. I've got like a million questions running through my head that I want to ask. And I think that we're definitely going to have to bring you on for another episode because there's just so much to unpack. And when you're talking about uh, the individual therapy sessions with the man that you were working with over that 11 and a half month stint, it sounds like, and this is something that I talk to the students about when I travel, is like there was some trust that had to be built up there. And when that trust was solid and you knew that you could trust him and you felt like he had your best interest in mind, it sounds like things kind of skyrocketed. Like they kind of took off and he was able to get you to reframe some of the thoughts that you were having, some of the ways that you were relating to some of those stressors in your life. He got you to take some tangible actions to remove some of those stressors from your life. And again, of course, social media impacts everybody differently. I love what you said. It's not good or bad. We all live in an area of gray, but as human beings, we want everything to be clear cut. But for you, he was able to specifically get to know you on an intimate level and then unpack that, which I think is really, really cool. And then there was other therapeutic options, which, I mean, horse therapy, that sounds really cool, really unique, especially unique at that age, learning how to take care of another organism, right? Taking care of another animal on the planet. It's really, really cool. So
absolutely.
In the last couple minutes here, there's some questions I have. So if I have a listener right now who they're listening, they know they're struggling with anxiety, depression, or suicide, how do they start to seek help?
There's multiple options. One, and this in the mental health community, I think this sometimes goes bypassed a little bit because a lot of people just say therapist office, right? Step into a therapist's office. But the first thing, this is in no order, but one that comes to mind is who's in your life? Is it who's close to you? Is it a best friend, a family member, a parent, a teammate, a coach? Who do you believe you have a close relationship with that is willing to listen to you and provide wise counsel, wise advice, and that will not shun you if you say some challenging or scary things to them? I would certainly get something off your chest and turn to that person. So one is look at your network and look at your personal life and who can you turn to? Because we're built for community. We're built for connection. And that's how us humans operate. Like we need people, and it's not just to play video games or sports with or go shopping with. We need people to do the real life stuff with. So right. I would look there first. Now, if you're open to therapy, I would certainly consider that, right? I mean, find a good option for you in your area. Psychology Today is a nice online resource to sort of filter therapist options for you by zip code, by challenge, by need, by preference, by cost, so on and so forth. So those are a couple options I would start as far as where. But one more thing, and this is kind of where therapy helps. But if you can sort of either do it on your own or with friends or family, is you have to identify the source before you find the solution. So everyone in society today, not everyone, but our society tends to operate in a quick fix mentality. We want things to just work itself out and just figure itself out. But before we jump to solutions, we have to identify the root cause, the source of the problem. And so sometimes it just takes self-reflection and honesty, right? Like people might send you to go to therapy, but perhaps you may not even need it. If you can just identify what your root cause is and produce a game plan to mitigate that or heal or mend that, if possible, then I think you may be well on your way. But certainly it takes a tribe. It's life is not meant to be lone wolf.
I love what you said about it. And I think that that's an easy, tangible first step too. Like I think anybody who's listening right now, you can take a second and think about, all right, who is somebody that I know will have my back no matter what, that I can open up to them about what I'm experiencing right now. So I love that. I think that that's a really, really easy, tangible first step. And then could not agree with you more on getting to the root. I think anybody who's been in this space as an advocate or a practitioner, or in my case, I'm a mental health coach, like
Yep.
getting to the root and identifying the source, like are these challenges coming from, and then working to reframe them, change the relationship with them. I always talk about the delete, delegate, or do model, like all these different ways to go about adjusting your life to improve your mental health, I think is so important. But what you're talking about is building awareness. And we're not taught how to build awareness, especially as it pertains to our mental health. And so, yeah. And then we live in a very fast-paced society. So it's all about the quick fix so that we can get back to being productive and doing this and doing that.
It's dangerous at times.
It is, especially because healing and being a human, the human experience it's meant to be slow. It's meant to be slow. I mean,
going against the grain, my friend. I love it.
Yeah.
So true.
It is true. And so I love what you said there. So then the only other question that I have, I have a couple more after, but what if someone listening right now knows someone that's struggling with anxiety, depression, or suicide? How do they start up a conversation to get that person on their path to recovery?
Hit them up. Don't overthink it, right? If it's your friend, your family member, somebody you're close to, don't pretend to be Mr. Doctor or Mrs. Doctor or hero. Just hit them up. Either go over to their house, text them, call them, FaceTime them, plan a coffee date, plan a lunch date, do what you normally do. Don't make it awkward or weird. However your organic relationship is, lean into that and just make sure make sure you channel that you're there for them, right? Validate them first, right? Listen to what they tell you and just remind them that you're there for them, that you're thankful that they shared, and that you're willing to help them and excited, to do so. And so I think we have to lead with validation, right? So we have to first vet the challenges. We have to vet the issues and the problems that they're willing to share and validate whatever those are. And then once we do that, if we have advice or if we have input that they would take well, I think it's fair to share that, but we also can't do it in a corrective or coaching way. It has to be in a very calm, slow, loving way. And oftentimes advice maybe in this realm isn't taken that well. So, showing up for them, validating them, listening, asking questions, being the friend that you always are, right? Not deviating from that. And then once you identify what the core is, what the challenges are, determining if you think you can kind of help them either with a next step or meeting up more or whatever, or pointing them the professional support route. If you identify that this is more of a foundational issue, not situational, potentially more in the diagnosis or disorder realm, or obviously if they are in danger or this is a near emergency.
I love that. I love the validation aspect. I think that that's so important. And I talk about that too in my work. It's just it's like what you said earlier. People want to feel heard. They want to feel seen. They want to know that people care. They want to know that they can take off the mask and be their true, authentic self, because experiencing stress, overwhelm, anxiety, depression, or thoughts of suicide, it's human. That is human. That is just a part of the human condition. I mean, the CDC says 50% of all Americans over the age of 18 are going to experience some form of anxiety or depression. So we're talking about millions upon millions. I mean, 80 plus million human beings, right? So spread that out across the globe. It's just a part of the human experience.
Oh, absolutely. You're on point. Allow me to add one quick thing here on this realm. So when you are given when you see an opportunity to help somebody, it can seem a little daunting perhaps, but view it as what an opportunity, what an honor. Like, you very well could be the only person in that person's life who is willing to step up, because people feel they are incapable or don't have the words or advice or experience to come alongside that person. So what they do is they retreat. But again, the pressure isn't for you to provide the service or the advice or the counsel. You're just to be there, right? And so I want to share something that Active Minds really makes known across the mental health community, and their kind of famous staple is that, you don't have to be an expert, but you do just have to be there. Being there is enough, because sometimes that person doesn't have anybody else, and it's a wonderful opportunity if you are able to be there for somebody who's struggling. So give yourself some grace. It's not about perfection. It's just about being there for them.
Wow. Greg, that's beautiful. And I agree so much. I think listening is the most important. Like you said, advice, if you feel they're ready to receive it, but advice oftentimes can be off-putting, right?
Sure.
So just listening, and I always say, like, if you do nothing more but just say over and over again, tell me more about that. You know what I mean? It just shows that you're listening, that you want to give, that you care. And so I think that that's beautiful. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to be there. And I think that that's huge. So last couple questions for you here is, what do you do in your personal life to, manage your mental health? That's question number one. So I'll give you that.
Sure. Multiple lenses to this. I mean, first one is people. So I have a wonderful wife who, we've been together for 5.5 years, married for 3.5 years, and people matter, right? So whether it's a wife or a roommate or whomever, right? People matter. People are a big deal. That's kind of why we're here in this life. So that is huge, right? I have 3 pets. They are wonderful. That certainly brings a lot of joy, right? So a lot of it is environmental, right? I think we tend to dismiss or undercut the importance of environmental. And obviously you don't get pets or like I didn't get a wife or get pets for my mental health, right? Like you get them because you love them and it's joyful. But it's certainly like the positive mental health impact is sort of a byproduct of that. But so a lot of it's environmental, the people around your life, hobbies, things you like to do. I like playing sports. I like trying local eateries and things, around the community, getting out in nature and all that. But the biggest one, and again, this is somewhat of a sort of mental health is a positive byproduct of this is my faith. My faith is my faith in God is like the foundation and focal point into how I carry out my life and my marriage. And so reading the Bible, reading scripture every day, doing daily devotions, praying, seeking God through prayer and with my wife, like that, I believe there's nothing greater that can be done in this life, and sort of again as a byproduct, like the mental health byproduct to that. So those are a few things that I would share help me. Obviously, everybody's different, and then making sure you have fun too, right? Like take a trip if you need to take a trip, right? Go on vacation, do whatever brings you genuine excitement and joy in life, as long as it's in a reasonable realm. So, everybody's different. I find mine, and I got to make sure you find what works for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People matter. Like you said, people matter. And that's why we're doing this right now. So what is one piece of advice you would give someone who is right at the start of their mental health journey?
There's a lot of ways to look at that. I guess I guess I'll sort of piggyback off this. It's one day at a time. You don't have to win the Super Bowl in a day. You don't have to build Rome in a day. It's just one day at a time. And even if you do one small thing that is a positive step in the right direction for yourself mentally, that is a win. Even if you're a little messy in other areas, right? Give yourself some grace. It's not about perfection. It's about just progress and baby steps and moving forward, and making sure you have that people network around you to live life in that way, not lone soldier.
You've brought that up a few times, and I love the, you're not alone aspect, not a lone wolf, and then progress over perfection, because there's grace in progress. And I remember I was at the gym. This would have been sometime last year, and I was in the midst of building my business, and I course, had a negative narrative. It's not far enough along. I'm not helping
Sure.
enough people. I want to help more people. I want to get to more people. And I remember it was like I was in this like negative headspace. And this guy, I was working out at the gym. I've never met this guy in my entire life. I don't know anything about him. And I remember I was like trying to do push-ups and I was like struggling on like the last two or whatever. And when I was finished, I looked up and I like made eye contact with him and he took out one of his or AirPods and he goes little by little, bro,
Yep.
little by little.
There
And
it is.
I think that that's what you're talking about right now.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
which is just that day-to-day process,
Hmm.
looking for progress, not perfection. And if we
Sure.
could get to that place, I think that a lot of people would improve their mental health and they'd be more committed to that process.
Absolutely. Because it makes it more bite-sized. Like you said, rep to rep, conversation to conversation, task to task, job to like in all aspects, right? Meal to meal. You know, you don't eat all 3 meals in one day, right? You eat 3 meals separately.
That's right. That's right. Oh man, you just gave me butterflies. That's so exciting. There's some beauty in the simplicity of life and
Mhm.
taking it moment by moment. And so I really appreciate you coming on, Greg. I feel like this was a conversation that was long overdue.
Amen.
And I'm just glad that we were able to be a part of this process of making people feel less alone in their journey. So thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely, Zach. Always a pleasure to connect with you. I'm really proud of you being a leader in the mental health space, and just obviously your book is a testament to who you are and what you care about. And one thing I love, not just the title of You're Not Alone, but you channel both of what we were talking about, because the book is that verbal grace and that verbal commitment that you're not alone, but also it's coupled with your life experience, and it's a wonderful thing. And so I'm just grateful to have our friendship, and just thank you for your time today and having me on, man.
The feeling's reciprocal. Glad to have you on,
That's
brother.
a deal.
I appreciate the time. And yeah, we'll be having you on again soon. So thank you.
Appreciate you, Zach.
All right, Greg.
Okay.